Tesla Motors has been the biggest success story in the automotive world in recent years. Despite being founded less than 2 decades ago, the Silicon Valley startup has developed some of the most important cars in the history of the automobile and has essentially forced automotive giants to play ball. They weren't always the golden child of the industry though. Just a decade ago, there were companies sprouting up all over the automotive landscape with the same end goal as them, and they had the shared center stage with Fisker Automotive for a time. Fisker raised well over $1 billion in funding and even managed to put a car into production, but they no longer exist, at least not in their original form. Their run in the electric car business is rife with controversy and raises a ton of questions. But one stands above the rest. What happened to Fisker? Henrik Fisker was a prominent car designer, having had senior positions at BMW and Ford. He left the industry heavy hitters behind in December of 2004 and founded Fisker Coachbuild in 2005. With colleague Bernhard Kohler, the company sold 2 products: the Tramonto, a $250,000 hardtop convertible based on the Mercedes-Benz SL55 AMG, and the $198,000 Latigo, a heavily modified BMW E63. They planned on building 150 of each, but only constructed 15 of the former and just 2 of the latter. Henrik Fisker pointed to skyrocketing fuel prices as the main reason for their shortcomings. Fisker Automotive was established in August of 2007 from the ashes of Fisker Coachbuild. Henrik and Kohler weren't alone. Quantum Technologies, an American software company, hopped on as a joint venture partner. Funny story about how they met, by the way. According to a 2008 article by GigaOM, Fisker met Alan Niedzwiecki, the president and CEO of Quantum Technologies, through Alan's girlfriend, who worked at a Range Rover dealership. One thing led to another, and Fisker and Niedzwiecki were talking cars over lunch. Here, Fisker expressed his desire to design gasoline cars in China. Niedzwiecki, smelling a business opportunity, asked, "Why don't you design a car around my drivetrain?" Fisker's response, "Let's start a company." The Fisker Karma prototype was unveiled at the 2008 Detroit Auto Show in January. The sedan caught the attention of the showgoers with its distinguishing styling, lofty performance claims, and forward-thinking technology. The Karma is low, long, and bears a strong resemblance to the cars that Henrik designed at Fisker Coachbuild. It shares a somewhat similar grille shape and taillight pattern. The company also stated the car could go from 0 to 60 in less than 6 seconds and be able to run on electric power alone for 50 miles. It doesn't solely rely on electricity, however. As the lithium-ion battery pack empties, a gasoline engine fires up and sends power to an onboard generator, which then charges the battery directly. Quantum Technologies developed the powertrain, which it dubbed the Q-Drive system. The most ambitious claim they made, however, was that it be produced in the 4th quarter of 2009 and be in customers' driveways in early 2010. That's a turnaround of just over 2 years, which may as well have been a blink of an eye in the world where product development cycles often exceed 5. Lastly, but certainly not least, Fisker Automotive said the Karma would start at around $80,000 and that customers could put a $5,000 deposit down on one to reserve their own. Fisker found itself back in the news in April when Tesla filed a lawsuit against them and claimed they stole confidential design information and trade secrets and used them to develop their own car. In 2007, Fisker paid Fisker Coachbuild about $875,000 to do some design work in the Model S, then known as White Star. In the suit, Tesla claimed Henrik had little prior experience designing electric cars. This hindered the project considerably, and their proposal wasn't up to Tesla standards. It was scrapped, but he used the experience gained working on the project to bring the Karma further along in development. They claimed he hid the fact that he was working on an electric car of his own at the time and jumped on the opportunity solely for his own benefit. This issue would linger until November, when an arbitrator ruled in Fisker's favor. Tesla was ordered to pay Fisker $1.1 million for attorney fees and costs. Developing the infrastructure to mass-produce cars is costly and time-consuming for even the largest companies, but Fisker found a way around this hurdle. They announced that Valmet Automotive, a Finnish contract manufacturer, had agreed to build the car at their facility. This was good news for the company as well as prospective buyers, as Valmet was already trusted to take on a portion of the Porsche Boxer's assembly. Fisker was also able to avoid having to develop their own engine, as they arranged to use the GM 2-liter Ecotec 4-cylinder as their range extender. Fisker debuted the Sunset hardtop convertible concept at the 2009 Detroit Auto Show in January. It's essentially a Karma with a retractable top and 2 fewer doors. It also shares its aggressive timetable with the Karma. The company claimed they'd have it ready by 2011 and the buyers could reserve one with a deposit. Instead of a mere $5,000, the minimum deposit was a whopping $25,000. Later this year, they released fuel economy estimates for the Karma, and they grabbed headlines. 83 grams of CO2 per kilometer and 67.2 miles per gallon. As this article from treehugger.com points out, the mileage is heavily dependent on how the car is driven. But these real-world numbers will no doubt vary a lot in the real world, because they are heavily dependent on how many miles you travel between charges. For example, if your daily driving is less than 50 miles the vast majority of the time, you'll burn a lot less fuel than someone who has a daily commute of more than 50 miles. This wasn't even the biggest news for Fisker in the month of September, as they were approved for a gargantuan conditional loan of $528 million from the Department of Energy. This sounds like a lot of money at first glance, but they wouldn't be getting it all at once. The cash would be doled out gradually as Fisker met certain milestones. It was only a fraction of the $25 billion Advanced Technologies Vehicle Manufacturer and Loan Program, was meant to help automakers transition to our alternative fuel vehicles and gradually wean themselves off of oil. Other recipients of the loan include Tesla, Ford, and Nissan. With their newfound revenue, Fisker worked toward expanding their production facilities for an eventual sub-$40,000 model. Their previous goal of 15,000 cars a year skyrocketed to 100,000. They went on the prowl for a manufacturing plant and purchased Wilmington Assembly in Delaware from GM for $18 million. The plant used to build the Pontiac Solstice and Saturn Sky, but General Motors was forced to shutter these brands as a result of the recession. After acquiring it, Fisker planned on spending an additional $175 million to refurbish and retool the factory to build the mystery car, internally dubbed Project Nina. According to an AutoWeek article on the matter, Fisker planned on building it by 2012 and selling it in 2013. It was eventually going to support 2,000 factory jobs and 3,000 supplier jobs. This endeavor, as well as others concerning the Karma, took about $193 million from their $528 million well. The company finally hit a snag in December when Henrik announced the Karma was going to be delayed until September 2010, or at least 6 months from when customers were originally expecting to receive their cars. Car and Driver pressed him for a reason. He blamed unreliable investors, the economic recession, and an unexpected holdup with their loan. They were forced to slow development of the car, and thus it was delayed. He reassured the public by saying the delay was solely because of financial reasons and not because of technical issues with the car. Fisker didn't have a car to show in January this year, but they did break some news in regard to their supplier. A123 Systems, a Michigan-based battery company, signed a multi-year deal to provide the power supply for the Karma. In May, they said production was further delayed into February 2011. They delayed the car again in June and pushed back to March or April of 2011. The only other notable development in 2010 was from a leaked email. Fisker initially had the price of around $80,000, but the message stated that prices would range from $95,900 for the base model to $108,000 for the environmentally friendly EcoChic trim. Fortunately, these prices were before the $7,500 tax credit, but it's still a considerable ways up from their initial price. Fisker held an event at Fontana Raceway in February, where they invited a few publications to test drive the car. Styling was universally praised, with many reviewers being surprised at how well the concept translated to production. The biggest change were the addition of thicker window pillars and reworked rearview mirrors. The interior appointments were also well received, though a few of them complained about the ergonomics of the rear seats. The door opening was narrow, and the car's sloping roofline severed headroom. Rounding out the positive for their driving dynamics, it had all the main points with a stiff chassis, linear steering, and great road feel. Automobile Magazine encapsulated their feelings on the car with this quote: The Chevy Volt is an $18,000 hatchback with a $41,000 sticker. The Nissan Leaf is a $15,000 Econo hatchback with a $33,000 MSRP. Even the livable Tesla Roadster is, essentially, a $110,000 sports car based on a $45,000 Lotus. The Fisker Karma is saddled with none of these problems. It's a $97,000 car with a $97,000 window sticker. Things weren't perfect, however. The biggest knock on the car revolves around the Ecotec range extender. It emits a soft humming noise when running on electricity, but the engine makes its whining sound that Autoblog described as completely uncharacteristic of a $100,000 Ford or anything. This review also mentioned the small luggage area, which measured at just 7.1 cubic feet. Fisker also wouldn't disclose the weight of the car. While reviewers weren't able to see how the car performed in more mundane applications, the Karma looked like it was worth the wait. A few months later, the EPA shot down Fisker's fuel economy claims. Not only did the EPA get 32 miles out of the electric charge, they also got a measly 20 miles per gallon of mixed driving. The main reason for the disappointing figure was thought to be a 5,300-pound curb weight. Fisker disputed this by pointing to emissions tests in Europe, but the car managed to get 52 miles on electricity. The Surf, a wagon variant of the Karma, was shown at the Frankfurt Auto Show in Germany. Fisker promised they'd be building it by 2013. Like the Sunset, they said customers could put deposits down on the car. Customer deliveries for the Karma were pushed back yet again, but they finally started gaining them in October. This would be short-lived, however, as Fisker issued a recall on all 239 cars they had built until that point. They'd uncovered an issue with the battery pack, which came fully assembled from A123 systems. The battery and coolant hoses were misaligned, which opened the possibility for coolant to leak into the battery compartment, possibly resulting in fire. There weren't any reported complications before the recall was announced, and A123 took the hit for the batteries, but the headline sullied Fisker's public perception of it. Fisker ran into another pitfall, or fell into the Grand Canyon head first, when the Department of Energy froze the other $336 million from their federal loan. They said the company wasn't keeping up with the contractual milestones the payments were contingent upon. Fisker laid off 26 workers and had to hold off on redeveloping the Wilmington plant for the time being. Tom Lasorda, Fisker's automotive vice chairman, took over as CEO from Henrik in February. Henrik stayed with the company and became the executive chairman. More in-depth reviews of the Karma surfaced. An Edmunds review was more critical of the car than an earlier test, reiterating the concerns about the interior ergonomics and small trunk, but also found more flaws. The low roof and exterior styling resulted in horrible rearward visibility. The touchscreen for the infotainment system completely washed out in sunlight. The most interesting flaw in the design was in the trunk. Edmunds cited gooseneck hinges that tend to crush items under them. The Consumer Reports review was by far the most critical. It was the lowest rated luxury sedan they tested, and the third lowest sedan overall. For comparison's sake, the cars under it were the Dodge Avenger, Chrysler 200, and Nissan Versa SV. It suffered from electronic glitches and had to make several trips back to the dealer. It even needed a full-on battery replacement. The car broke down on their track and had to be towed away. The last issue seemingly prompted Fisker to issue another recall. It was the same issue as last time. Like before, Fisker notified all customers about the recall and A123 sent out replacements. Both recalls ended up costing A123 $65 million in the long run. Wilmington went through a few more rounds of layoffs. The first saw Fisker shed 20 jobs from the plant in February, leaving just 12 engineers and technicians. These people were let go in April, which meant the factory that was supposed to build their mainstream car was empty. Project Nina debuted at the New York Auto Show in April as the Atlantic. It carried over the Karma's design language, but in a package about the size of the Audi A5. It ditched the 2-liter Ecotec engine for a new 4-cylinder from BMW. They pushed its debut back a month from 2013 to mid-2014. A Karma was involved in a garage fire in Texas in May, and fire officials pointed to the car as the source of it. Fisker disputed this, and the NHTSA got involved sometime later. Another car burned up in August, this one in California. It was in a parking lot when the left front part of the car was set on fire. Fisker was quick to respond to this. 8 days after the incident, they issued a recall for a malfunctioning cooling fan. They said they'd replace the units in all of the cars they built to date. Traditionally, Valmet Automotive takes the Scandinavian summer, a period between mid-July and mid-August, off. This meant they weren't building cars during this time. Employees returned to the factory in August, but didn't get to construction immediately. Lasorda and the new management wanted to renegotiate their contract. Projection was put off for this as well, but they planned on getting back to it after negotiations were finished. The company put the upcoming SURF and overdue sunset on indefinite hold in August. When asked for a reason, they said it was to put more energy into bringing the Atlantic to market. They received an additional $100 million in funding on October 9th to help with this effort. But another issue came up with A123 a few weeks later that jammed up their plans. They filed for bankruptcy on October 16th after defaulting on a $249 million loan from the government. This meant they could no longer provide batteries for Fisker, which hadn't built a car since July. Now they wouldn't be able to get cars out the door even if they did get around to mending their relationship with Valmet. Fisker said the news wouldn't affect them much though, as they had enough cars to sate demand through the first quarter of 2013. The company topped off a disastrous 2012 with a bang. Hurricane Sandy destroyed over $30 million worth of cars. On October 27th, stormwater made its way onto Port Newark and flooded 338 Fiskers, and nearly 10,000 cars in total. 16 out of the 38 cars shorted out and caught fire. The salt from the water corroded the vehicle control units, which caused the blaze. Meanwhile, Wanjiang, a massive Chinese auto parts corporation, took the initial steps to purchase the A123. Fisker spent a little while searching for another supplier, but ultimately decided to wait for that transaction to become official before resuming production. Wanjiang put up a bid of $257 million, and the acquisition was finalized on January 30th, 2013. But Fisker wouldn't be in any state to make good on this. Removed from a consistent revenue stream, Fisker went looking for either a partner or a bidder to ease the load. They spoke with several companies, including Geely and Dongfeng, but they all fell through. In addition to their financial woes, the company also had turmoil on the corporate side of things. Hendrik Fisker, the co-founder and main creative force behind the company, jumped ship in March of 2013. Neither party went into too much detail of the divorce, but Hendrik did say that major disagreements with management on business strategy played a major role in the shakeup. Fisker furloughed their US employees for 1 week on March 28th. In an Autoblog post, they said, "This is a common practice, particularly in the automotive industry, to manage costs and operations based on current activity levels and commercial requirements." Honestly, it doesn't sound so bad when they put it like that. They're just adjusting their workload based on their needs at the time. This is nothing to worry. Fisker laid off 3/4 of their staff the following week. They made the decision in order to save as much cash as possible while they continued to look for a buyer. Unfortunately, the company kicked the employees to the curb so quickly and with such ferocity that they found a lawsuit stuck to their shoe when they looked down. A former employee sued them for violating the WARN Act, or a law that requires businesses to give at least 60-day notice before going through with large-scale layoffs, and wanted them to pay all the former employees' wages for at least that long. All of the signs of financial ruin were in place, and after drawing out the inevitable for a few more months, Fisker Automotive finally declared for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on November 22nd. This was the end of one chapter in the history, but the beginning of another. A company named Hybrid Technologies put up $25 million to buy the company, but Wanjiang burst back onto the scene and put up a bid of their own. An auction broke out, and Wanjiang was the one who came away with Fisker for a price of $149 million. The deal was finalized on February 18, 2014, and they planned to resume Karma production sometime in 2015. These plans were unsurprisingly delayed several months to mid-2016. They received Wilmington Assembly as part of the deal, but opted to move production of the car to a plant in Moreno Valley, California. Wanjiang couldn't retain the Fisker name, so they re-established the company as Karma Automotive in October of 2015. The stillborn car, now called the Karma Revero, debuted for a second time in September of 2016, and examples were sent to dealers in May of the following year. Magazines got a hold of them as well, and reviews were... Once spearheading the green car revolution, The Karma Rivera is now practically a fossil and finds itself playing a game it can't possibly hope to win. It still has the same bugs it did when it launched despite a 3-year sabbatical. Issues that a planned facelift won't fix. The thing that really puts the nail in the coffin though is the price. The promised $80,000 price point has now ballooned to $130,000, and could even break $150,000 with options. This puts it up against the Porsche Panamera Turbo and Mercedes-Benz S63 AMG, leather-bound, heat-seeking missiles that blow the Rivera out the water. Forget 2019 for a second, the Tesla Model S rendered it obsolete a whole 5 years ago. The new owner has pockets as deep as the Mariana Trench, and a frenetic desire to rival Tesla. They can only hope that dumping millions of dollars into this cause works out in their favor this time around.